Let's bring into the conversation then the political analyst, Professor Barry Hanyane. Prof, thank you and good afternoon and Happy New Year to you. Politically, how significant a step, how significant a milestone is the receipt of this report? Initially, there was, debate as to whether or not there was a project called state capture. We moved from there to initial, difficulty in getting the commission set up as per the recommendations of the public protector, the remedial actions of the public protector. But, 3 years later, here we are.
Chilasize, you're quite right. Good afternoon to you and all the best in the year. And of course, good afternoon to your viewers. Look, I think today signifies quite a few things. One, the symbolic handing over, which then says to us as ordinary citizens, doubling up as taxpayers, that we need to know the worth and the value for money of the entire exercise. But then it begins by the attempt to dispel any myth that perhaps the state capture phenomenon did not exist in the first place. And I think today's gesture should then seek to dispel any claim whatsoever that state capture did not exist. And therefore, this is just simply allegations of a kind. And yet, we're sitting with so many anecdotal reports that suggest very strongly that there are corrupt cases in the public service, in the public sector, in our municipalities, and of course in the state-owned businesses. So who are we then to deny a chance of a commission to give us the kind of exposure, understanding that indeed this phenomena did take place, and if it did, who are the perpetrators? It's not a South African phenomenon in the first place. Countries like Nigeria, countries like Ukraine have gone through the same more or less phase that we're going through, albeit with different consequences. So this is our turn. I think it's important that as a society, as a polity, we embrace the exercise.
In a moment, Professor Hanyane, I will ask you about your take in as far as what the president should do immediately once he receives this report. But I think before I do that, I'd like us to talk about the ground that this report, the first of three, will find in terms of public sentiment. During the proceedings of the commission, you could tell that there was a point at which, there was the overwhelming yearning for the truth to be revealed, to the full extent. Yeah. Not that it waned, but over a period of time, you got a sense that opinion was divided as to the work of the commission. I don't know if you picked up. Yes. I certainly picked up a narrative that started to say that, this commission is nothing but an expensive gossip session. There is no evidence, some would argue. Although, it must be said, every time you say this, that in many instances we got to hear, from the horse's mouth, as it were, from people who were actually involved in many, many instances, who were coming forward to say, we did this is what we did, and this is how it transpired, and these were the aims and objectives. So in a long and roundabout way, I'm asking you, what kind of ground will this report find, in your view, in as far as public sentiment is concerned?
To answer your question, let me bring my, and of course you're asking for a personal opinion and response in this instance. Let me bring my stance on the entire matter. I've taken a personal initiative to say, let me go to any reputable bookseller, buy any book that actually characterizes the anecdotal experiences of individuals who have either been victimized, purged in one way or another, or suffered some form of prejudice, all under the umbrella of the so-called state capture. And so far, that book collection is looking impressive. If you look at people like Mselego, the former DG, GCIS, his own account of saying, I was there, I was fired under dubious circumstances, and other fellow DGs were also victimized much the same way. So these are the kinds of at least packaged evidences, if you want, that we need to hear as to who were the perpetrators, what were the circumstances, and perhaps what were the consequences of those actions. So without a much more scientific approach to the entire exercise, how best can we arrive at the creation of a body of knowledge that says somebody was sleeping at the job, somebody manipulated systems and processes, some regulations, some procedures were also violated in favor of dubious appointments, for instance. And I can mention a whole range of case references in this instance. So my interest as things lie is, one, the terms of references still the de rigueur point of view that says the commission conducted itself according to law. That's the first point. Secondly, did the body of knowledge as collected remain credible in the sense that it can withstand any form of veracity before a court of law, for instance, as being the litmus test of it. And in the end, we are able to account to the public that indeed the exercise was worth every rand spent, so that in future we don't reinvent the wheel by recreating the same mistakes that were observed given the period under investigation.
Parting shot, Professor Hanyane, what have you made of the contentions of opposition parties that, you know, we need as much transparency as possible in the handling of this report? We can't give President Cyril Ramaphosa a blanket benefit of the doubt and not put pressure on him to be as transparent as possible. And for instance, in tabling it before Parliament as soon as possible and making the report public. And those who have said actually he should not even be receiving this report because he is a conflicted person, they go as far as to argue that, you know, when it was believed that former President Jacob Zuma was conflicted, he could not exercise what was a constitutional duty in terms of the process to appoint the judge to head up the commission. Why should the same not apply to President Ramaphosa?
But again, he is the sitting president. The Constitution does permit and makes provision that, one, he should establish a commission of inquiry when the need arises. Already that exercise was done for him. I think it's okay for him to receive the report. After all, here lies a commission that for me has so far done somewhat of a sterling job. When you go to Google, you would find your daily transcripts of all the evidence presented before the commission. So for researchers, commentators, and analysts, already these are persons who can assure you that perhaps they have a chance in predicting the kind of temperature that this report is likely to raise, given the access to those transcripts on a daily basis. So for those who understand the scientific analysis of data, of information, this should not be a problem. And in fact, it is the very same foundation of laying bare the need to promote transparency as well as accountability.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time. Professor Barry Hanyane weighing in there as we expect the handover of the first batch of 3 reports, 3 volumes, let's call them that, of the report of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. That process, as far as processes are concerned, is actually set to get underway, our understanding, around 3:30 p.m. And we will bring that to you live here on eNCA. It is a significant moment. But of course, we do expect that there's going to be that court challenge by Democracy in Action to try and interdict at least the handover to the president of that particular report. Let's see how far that one goes.